What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome back to Gaming 101 with Mr. Berger. Tonight we're going to take a look at this epic Golem, Goblin Hut, Night Witch Beatdown deck. Now this deck has a lot of flex spots, but that's kind of the main archetype and idea behind the deck, is the combo between those three cards. So, I love Golem. I absolutely love Golem. Golem is a really fun card to play with. It's the heaviest tank in the game. It goes for these unstoppable snowball pushes, and it gets you a lot of 3 crown wins. So if you're trying to farm out those 3 crown wins for your clan chest, for your gem rush, for your gold rush, or just because you love 3 crown massive pushes, this is the deck for you. It's awesome. I love it. Alright guys, let's talk about kind of the major points and strategies behind this deck, some more detailed components of it, and then of course card replacements, because there's a ton in this deck. At the end here, I want to go double time through some replays and just kind of skim through them and explain a little bit more in depth on how I play this deck, with examples running, right? Okay, so go for the big push. That's the biggest, most important part of this deck. You're going for a big snowball push. You're going for this massive beatdown push. You got this super heavy tank, and you got these great units that support it in a bunch of different ways, and the spells also are chosen specifically because they play a very particular and useful role. Alright, since it's a really big push deck, don't be afraid to lose a tower. So if you drop one tower, that's okay. It's okay to lose your left tower and just ignore it, ignore their hog that's taken down your tower, and support your golem in the right lane and go for a big push, because the likeliness has it you'll get a chance to plow right through them, and if they continue to support the opposite lane of your golem, as long as they don't kill you before you kill them, right, you'll just annihilate their king tower. I've done it so many times, and I want to share some of those replays in the background with you. I've been running this deck on my main account in ladder. I leveled up the cards so that they're good enough. I'm just over 4,000 now. Gotten to about 4,200 with it now, because at the end of the season, everything resets to 4,000 unless you break about 4,600, right? So, it was definitely great in tournaments too, at tournament level standard and challenges, so give it a try. So don't be afraid to lose a tower. Go for that massive big push. You can probably get a 3 crown with this deck. Now let's talk about some opening moves, and then some more strategies and some card replacements. So for opening moves, ideally, you don't want to open with a golem. But let's talk about that, because there's going to be some exceptions. So generally what you want to do is open with something like a hut, and I like to place the hut usually similar to where you would place a defensive structure like an inferno tower or a cannon. So that's what? 2 tiles left of your right tower, or 2 tiles right of your left tower, so in between your 2 princess towers, and up 3 to 4 tiles from your king tower. That's kind of a optimal spot. It distracts most tanks and hogs and things like that. So I use the hut there generally. You can also place it behind your princess tower if you're more comfortable with that. There's a lot of different strategies for it, so it's really a matter of preference, I think. But that's where I like to place my hut, and that's my ideal opening move. Otherwise, I would cycle in the back with my flying machine, my mega minion, or my night witch. If I have to use the lumberjack, I will, but he's more of a defensive counter push card, and I like to save him to push with my golem, because he goes for this massive beatdown. Alright, let's get another replay going here. So, if you can't put your hut down, cycle other things in the back. Figure out what they're running, figure out their deck, build up an elixir advantage, and then go for that massive golem push. That's generally how you want to play this deck if you want to play it a little bit more safely. Now you'll see, especially in the later replays, I kind of disregard that rule, and oftentimes I'll just go for a big YOLO push and put the golem as my opener behind my king tower, and just go for one massive push and completely ignore one tower while my golem pushes in the opposite lane and just plows through them and blows up their king tower, and I win with a 3 crown. It's great. I love it. I love this deck. So if you do want to YOLO it and open with a golem in the back, be my guest. Try it out. It's a lot of fun. If you're just playing for fun and you're trying to farm out those 3 crown wins, then why not try it out, right? Now you got a lot of air in this deck too, because you got the Mega Minion You got the bats from the Night Witch, and you got the flying machine. So as you can see there, I counter ground units like that Sparky, really powerful, deadly ground units really well with all that air. So keep that in mind as well. So that's your opening moves. Generally hut, cycle in the back, figure out their deck, and then build up an elixir advantage and golem. Or if you decide you just want to YOLO it, go ahead, place that golem in the back as your opener. Now let's talk more about some detailed strategies and intricacies of this deck. So you'll notice that you don't have an E-Wiz, right? Why is that significant? Well, E-Wiz is one of the best support cards for heavy decks with a very heavy tank, and seeing as Golem is the heaviest tank in the game, you would kind of want an E-Wiz in there. So if you do have an E-Wiz and you want to swap the Night Witch or something out, maybe even the Lumberjack with an E-Wiz, that's fine. Go right ahead. This particular deck does well without it. Now why is the E-Wiz so important? Well, you're going to see a lot of Inferno Towers and Inferno Dragons that are going to counter your Golem. That's kind of like the hard counter to your Golem is Inferno Dragon and Inferno Tower. So E-Wiz has that landing stun when he enters the arena, and he also has a consistent stun every time that he attacks. And he attacks 2 units at once if they're both within range. So he'll interrupt Inferno Dragons and Inferno Towers. So that's why he's really good in this deck. But you don't have him. Your only stun is a zap. So your zap is your only interrupt. So make sure that you use it wisely. Poison. Poison clears out the way for your Golem. I'll talk about more detailed card replacements a little bit later, but just keep in mind, Poison kind of clears a path for your Golem to safely walk down the lane. A classic traditional counter to a heavy tank is going to be Swarm Card. See how he uses the Minion Horde right there to counter my Golem. Now I didn't have enough elixir for the Poison in time, so I didn't use it to clear out his Minion Horde, but it would have been great if I had that Poison a little bit earlier and cleared out his Minion Horde. That second tower probably would have gone down. So Poison kind of clears down a path because you lay it down and it stays down there for, I can't remember if it's like 6 or 8 seconds in the current meta, but it clears that path down, and thus it's more effective than something like a fireball or a rocket, in my opinion, right? So Night Witch. Night Witch builds up bats, and she builds up more and more from further behind. So she kind of goes with this whole beatdown archetype, this huge heavy snowball push that is the Golem. Because every deck you have a Golem in is probably going to be a big beatdown deck. That's just naturally, because he's the heaviest tank in the game. So the Night Witch, she builds up her bats in the back, so you can get this massive army of bats and your support from the Night Witch behind your Golem, especially in double elixir time. So I really like her in this deck, but she is definitely replaceable. Now, remember this is a heavy deck, so it's going to be a different play style. A lot of the decks that I've showcased have been cycle decks, some siege decks. I have done some beatdown decks for sure. I know I did that giant beatdown deck recently, and that was awesome. I love that video. That was pretty fun. So keep in mind this is going to be kind of more of that playstyle, not a cycle playstyle. So you're not going to do things like always have to react to your opponent right away, right? Sometimes you can just ignore them and just go for the big push. So that being said, I know that if this is a personal thing, right? I know that sometimes the BMing, especially the excessive spamming of the emotes, just gets annoying. And I'll admit, it irks me a little bit when it gets excessive. A couple here and there, especially if they're, not just spamming angry and crying face, it's alright. But the excessiveness does get a little bit distracting. And if it's not a problem for you, don't worry about it. That's fine. Whatever floats your boat, right? But consider actually muting your opponent, especially if you lose one tower, because that might distract you from building up your massive push in the other lane, which can eventually allow you to go from a 0-1 to a 3-1. What that means is, of course, you lost one tower and they got all 3. All of a sudden, you've destroyed their king tower because you pushed the opposite lane of their hog, and you just won the match with a 3 crown. So consider muting your opponent, because this is a different playstyle. You want to go for a big, heavy push. Big snowball. So placement of the Golem. Usually I place the Golem in the back, and you'll see this in a lot of the replays. I like to place the Golem all the way behind the king tower. There's a lot of reasons for that, the main one being it allows the golem the most time on your side of the arena, which allows you to build up the biggest potential snowball. Of course, you can argue it's not a safe place to put it, because if you place the golem behind your king tower, they can likely place counter units in the opposite lane, and you have nothing to counter them. You could place the golem alternatively a little bit in front of your king tower, kind of where my goblin hut is right now, and that will allow the golem to tank any oncoming units that they might place in the same lane as the golem, or potentially even opposite lane units depending on what they send, right? So there's a few places to place the golem. I like to place him all the way in the back, but if you want to be a little bit safer, just place him kind of in front of your king tower, a few tiles similar to where that bottom goblin hut is right now, and that will be a little bit more safe. Later in the game, however, especially in double elixir time, you can place him at the bridge. You can place him in the pocket, which is front and center of the opponent's lane, right where that goblin hut, the opposing goblin hut, is right now. Once you've got one princess tower down, of course. I couldn't place anything there right now, but once I got that left princess tower down, I could place a golem kind of in that pocket up there, front and center of their side of the arena, and it would go straight for the opposite princess tower in the right lane. So if you place a golem all the way in the back, let's get another replay going here. If you place a golem all the way in the back, and it's double elixir, and you've cycled through all your cards, because this is a really heavy deck, so it's kind of hard to cycle through your cards, you can actually manage to get 2 golems on the field at once, and you'll see this in some of the replays, and that's just, oh man, pretty much unstoppable. Like, if you can do that, that's just this massive beatdown. There's not much they can do about it, especially if you've got some support units. And if they've overcommitted to the opposite lane because they see your heavy push, then it'll be even harder for them to stop it, because they'll just be kind of trickling their elixir in, and all your support units will be smashing their support and counter units one at a time, and then you'll just have destroyed their king tower. So, you can get 2 golems in there. Later in the game, especially in double elixir, place 1 golem behind, all the way in the back, behind your king tower, and then once it walks up, you can place a second one at the bridge, in the pocket, or even as far up as you possibly can to go for the king tower. Why go for 2 princess towers when you can just go straight for the king tower, right? And you'll see that in this game. I actually allow him in this replay to take my left tower so that I can go for a 3-crown win on the right. Let's talk about card replacements now. There's a lot of flex spots in this. This is a very flexible archetype. Since the golem does the role of playing the massive tank, you can put pretty much anything behind him and it just blows stuff up. He's a very flexible card. As you can see, you can use him as an emergency defensive thing against elite barbs or whatever they might be sending. Not the best play, but I didn't have much else to do. So for all support units, keep this in mind. And this is actually something that I commented on one of Clash with Ash's videos earlier today. And he actually replied and said he agreed with me. That was, if you have higher level support cards, use those if you're trying to push ladder. So if like you have a level 1 Night Witch, but then you've got a max level musketeer, level 11, I mean, go ahead and plop that musketeer in there. Might as well, because I think that's going to be much more effective on ladder. But if you're playing in tournaments or challenges at tournament level standard, where everything's scaled to the same level pretty much, then, you know, if you have these cards that are in this deck in the top left here, play them. Alright, so again, if you're playing on ladder, just go for your highest level support cards for replacement and put that golem in there. Now let's go into individual cards. For Zap, generally my go-to replacement for Zap is going to be Log, right? And you've heard that in my other videos. But in this case, I'm going to switch things up a little bit, because as I mentioned earlier, Zap is your only interrupt in this deck. And since you have a golem, you want an interrupt. You want something to interrupt that Inferno Dragon and that Inferno Tower. So it's your only stun in this deck. So if you want to replace it with something, I would recommend actually replacing it with an Ewiz, or with Zappies even, if you have Zappies leveled high enough. And even if you have low level Zappies, again, something that Ash mentioned in one of his videos earlier today, Zappies can be beneficial even at low level, because their most useful thing is their utility, not their damage. The fact that they stun, right? So if you have low level Zappies, go ahead and plop them in there, or an Ewiz. If you don't have either or any of those 3 cards leveled enough, you could put a log in there. But hey, why not run Zap? Zap's a common card. Most of us have it leveled up, so I would recommend Zap if you have it. Mega Minion's definitely a flex spot. I was thinking Lumberjack or Mini P.E.K.K.A. because you want that something kind of like that defensive counter push roll, something to plop on top of their Musketeer or Wizard that's behind their tank or their Hog to destroy their support. So it's like a support unit killer. But then I thought, okay, what else do we have for anti-air in this deck? Well, we do have our 2 spells. We got the Spear Goblins. We actually have a good amount of anti-air. So if you wanted to put another melee attacking, ground attacking unit, you could. But I would stick with something that can attack air. So my go-to, something that's common, would probably be minions. Maybe a Dart Goblin. If you don't have anything else, hey, just put those Musketeers and Archers in there. Those are always going to be my go-to support units because they're one of the lowest arena units. Excuse me, they are 2 of the lowest arena cards. You get them in training camp if I'm not mistaken, right? And they're easy to level because they're common and rare, right? And you get them really low so you can continually request them from the day that you start the game. Alright. For Flying Machine, I think Dart Goblin would be a fun replacement. The fun of Flying Machine and the utility and the strength of Flying Machine in this deck is that since you have that massive tank that soaks up all the damage in front, the Flying Machine stays way in back with its massive range and just shoots everything and supports that tank like crazy. And the Dart Goblin plays a similar role. The Dart Goblin and the Flying Machine have very long range. If you see the shadow of the Flying Machine where it was there while it was shooting the tower, it was just over the river. It was just like the tile past the river. And the shadow signifies where an air unit actually is. So that tells you a little bit about the Flying Machine's range. You can look at the specific range in the stats if you're interested. The Dart Goblin has similar very long range. They're both very susceptible to spells, but that being said, since they are long range, they're not going to be generally placed in the same spot as your other support units. So if you have a Musketeer or a Witch in here, or even compared to your melee units like your Lumberjack or your Mega Minion, they got much longer range. So if they try to fireball your Goblin Hut, or your Night Witch, or your Lumberjack, or if you got a Musketeer in there, they're probably not going to hit that fireball onto your Flying Machine or your Dart Goblin as well, because of that significantly longer range. So that's why I like Dart Goblin in the place of Flying Machine. Again, if you don't have anything else, replace it with Musketeers or Archers if leveling is your problem. For a Goblin Hut, I would say another spawner building. Barbarian Hut isn't that great in the current meta. It's been weak for a while now, so I wouldn't go with that, but I would go with one of the other ones, probably Furnace or Tombstone. Barbarian Hut is also very expensive, so this deck is already a 4.3 cost, so I wouldn't go with that. I would go with one of the cheaper ones. You could probably slap in a Tornado or something else that plays a similar defensive role, but I like the massive buildup of the Goblins. Goblin Hut's a pretty easy card to get, pretty easy card to level, so if you have it, I would recommend the Goblin Hut. It's really good in the current meta because although Goblin Hut got a nerf in the last patch, Spear Goblins got a significant buff a few patches ago, and that minor nerf was not enough to set back the Spear Goblin Hut. It's very powerful in the current meta. So again, if you don't have anything else, replace it with support cards or another spawner building, but I would highly recommend the Goblin Hut in this deck. And again, the whole point of this deck is Goblin Hut, Golem, Night Witch, Beatdown, right? So it's kind of part of the team of this deck. But it is replaceable if you absolutely have to. Poison, again, I was thinking Fireball, right? Fireball is my go-to replacement. It costs the same, it's similar damage, it clears out Musketeers, blah 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 blah. But then I thought about the utility of Poison, as I mentioned earlier, is to clear a path for your Golem. So the go-to counter to Golem is going to be like a Skeleton Army or a Goblin Gang or a Minion Horde. And so if you place down that Poison in his path, it'll instantly destroy those things once they are spawned on top of your Golem. So although Log doesn't hit air, so it wouldn't be good against Minions or Minion Horde, it's great against Skeletons and Goblin Gang and Goblins and Spear Goblins and so on and so forth, the really weak units that you'll see that will counter your Golem. And it plays a similar role to the Poison in the way that it clears a path for your Golem. So I was thinking log might be a good replacement for poison. It's a lot weaker. It's different because it only costs 2, so it's definitely a weak spell, and then you'd have 2 weak spells in this deck. But somebody try it out, let me know how it goes. I kind of had this like theory crafting idea of how, you know, the log plays the role of the poison because it clears the path for the golem. Alright. Golem. Again, if you're replacing the golem, might not be the deck for you. But that being said, you can just slap in another heavy tank. Why not, right? Play this with like a lava hound, a giant. Somebody play with a giant skeleton. Play with a giant skeleton and let me know how it goes. And if you're going to play with a giant skeleton, throw a clone in there. Why not? You got Lumberjack and Night Witch already. Play it with giant skeleton, put a clone in there. Dude, looking at this deck now, you could put a clone in there in the place of, you know, Goblin Hut or Flying Machine or Mega Minion or one of those other spells. And it'd be great. It synergizes with a ton of things. So, why not? Run a giant skeleton and clone. Let me know how it goes. Or even Golem and clone. Let me know how it goes. Alright, for Lumberjack, the go-to replacement is going to be Mini P.E.K.K.A. because it costs 4, which is the same. They both got buffed recently. They're both heavy-hitting melee units that are used to counter the enemy's support cards. If you don't have a Lumberjack or a leveled up Mini P.E.K.K.A, you could replace it with another similar kind of support countering unit. Like, let's say, the Minions, right? Minions are great. Mini P.E.K.K.A hits a lot heavier than Lumberjack, but attacks a lot slower, so they're slightly different, but honestly they're similar DPS, similar health. The Lumberjack does have that rage, which is pretty awesome in just about any deck, but it's kind of an extra cookie, and if you don't have Lumberjack, you could put Mini P.E.K.K.A in there. I was thinking E-Wiz would be good too, because it has that very powerful defensive counter push potential, and as I mentioned earlier, it synergizes very well with heavy beatdown decks like this Golem deck. So E-Wiz would be a good replacement for the Lumberjack. I was thinking Mega Knight too, but that would make it a really expensive deck. If you're running this deck in double or triple elixir challenges, then why not put a Mega Knight in there? That would be great. But in regular games, I think it would just make it way too heavy. You've already got a 4.3 average elixir cost deck, so it's already really heavy and expensive, so probably not anything too heavy. And again, any of these cards can just be replaced with like your highest level support cards. So like if you have max level minions or max level musketeer or whatever, just put that in there, especially if you're playing this on ladder. But if you're playing it in tournaments and challenges, then play for the fun of it, or play what you think is the best, right? Now lastly, Night Witch. Night Witch, as I mentioned, has the potential to snowball very powerfully with your Golem, and with any beatdown deck. So does the Witch, and the Witch is, again, obtained in training camps, so it's very easy to get, very easy to level, especially now that you can request cards on Sunday, epic cards on Sundays. You used to not be able to request epic cards at all. So, I would replace the Night Witch with the regular Witch. If you don't have her, again, just your regular support cards like Musketeer or Archers. Maybe an Executioner, because he's tanky, and that would work out really well, because it would survive fireballs and poisons and things like that they're likely to use to counter your Flying Machine and your other support cards. Again, though, it costs 5, so it's definitely more expensive. I believe the Witch costs 5 as well, though. Night Witch only costs 4. So that's it as far as card replacements go. Why don't we run through these replays? I'm going to go ahead and go double time from now on, because I don't want this video to get too atrociously long. Now, in this video, I actually lose this match. So I wanted to show at least one loss, because I'm not trying to show off the fact that I'm a good player, because honestly I'm not that great of a player. I'm just mediocre. I just love theory crafting and coming up with strategies and showcasing decks and things like that. And I love this game. I love playing this game. So this was against Royal Giant. There's probably a few mistakes that I made here. I probably didn't defend hard enough. Maybe I shouldn't have gone for that hard left push with the Golem. And see, I didn't support him well enough. So that skeleton army, as I mentioned, the swarm cards, that's going to be one of their go-to counters for your Golem. That skeleton army just annihilated him, and only like half the skeletons chased him. The other half went for the tower, so it worked out really well for him. He's got Magic Archer in this deck too, and seeing that it's a brand new card, I am not familiar with how to counter it too well yet. I'm still learning it, because I've only seen it a few times other than in the challenge. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at this Hog Mortar deck. And I believe this one was a good comeback, as I said in the share description, in the replay share. Alright, so as you can see, I opened with the Goblin Hut there. He mortars defensively. I counter on the left. I spend a good chunk of elixir trying to defend on the left. Thinking about it again, I probably should have just put more elixir on the right. Now I don't have anything to counter that minion horde because I invested too much elixir on the left. I do get the poison down. It's a little bit late though. I did get some good damage off on his right tower, but he got way more off on my left tower. I'm going to put the Goblin Hut in the bottom right now. I just decided to switch it up. I defend. What I should have done is place the flying machine just one tile on the right side of the arena so that it would shoot that hog and everything on the left and then continue to fly over to the right side of the arena rather than to the left side. Because at this point, I've done a good chunk of damage on the right side, so I probably want to continue on that side. Of course, this is a very heavy beatdown deck, so you don't necessarily need to chip away and worry about which tower you've chipped away at. You want to go for that big massive push, so I could continue to go on the left side, and that might work out as well. But I opt to go on the right. As you can see, I get two golems there in the same lane, and there's just nothing he can do about it at this point. I just continue to support that golem. I put down the poison, which kills his bats and his minion horde. Massive value, and he's got the goblin gang, and the poison takes care of that as well. And look at that, I give him a GG, because it was a pretty good game. Alright, thanks Zeus for the cool replay. Now let's jump into a couple more replays. I want to show you guys the more potential of this deck, and I will kind of talk about what's going on here, and then we will call it a video. Alright, I placed the Goblin Hut in the back this time. What I do there is I perfectly place the Lumberjack to counter his support unit, the Musketeer. I don't really gain any benefit of that rage, but that's okay. You're not always placing the Lumberjack to gain his rage benefit. Sometimes you're just using him as a defensive card, a powerful, high DPS card. Now it looks like I'm going up against the Trifecta deck, which is Hog, Valkyrie, Musketeer. This is a very classic archetype that recently found itself in a resurgence because Valkyrie got a buff and got another buff in the last patch. She was buffed a few patches ago, I believe, and then she was buffed again in the most recent patch. It was an attack speed buff, so it gives her a DPS increase. Now, your Goblin Hut is a building, so it will distract hogs, golems, giants, etc., things that attack buildings. So you can use it to counter hog, especially if you know how to place it very well. Now, I didn't quite catch it, but I could have used a zap there to counter that Inferno Tower that was on my golem. I opted to go for the hard push on the right there, just keep the pressure up on him. Of course, he's got another Inferno Tower in play, which isn't good for me. But even though that Inferno Tower destroys my golem, it kind of lumbers its way up there, and then it smacks it a couple times, maybe the death damage does some damage to it, and then it has two golemites that spawn. Then the Inferno Tower has to deal with both of those golemites, which also have their own death damage. Okay, I want to skip that one, and I got a few more down here. Alright, let's run through these three really quickly, and then we're going to call it a video. Okay, so for this next one, these are good examples of me getting some 3 crowns. So you can see how I decide to go for one big massive push, and I may ignore the opposite lane. Now, the flying machine placement on that was bad. I should have placed it behind the golem more, but I really wanted to kill that princess. I probably could have just ignored the princess and gotten much more value off the flying machine, but it works out okay for me. I use the poison to kill his princess. Now, the poison not only kills swarm units, but if your golem is up on their tower already, and they place like a princess or a musketeer or a wizard or anything like that, any standard mid-health support cards, the poison can be placed so that it chips away at the tower and also hits their support card. And if they sit in it long enough, it will destroy a wizard or a musketeer if it's at equal level. So a level 4 poison to a level 7 musketeer, as tournament standard is. I placed the golem in the back there. Not the best placement of his goblin barrel, but he's probably trying to juke me so that I didn't use my zap and zap all his goblins. Now he uses the miner to try to take on my night witch. Not bad, but it doesn't work out. Now here's where the big push comes in. You can see that I just placed the next golem. I save up for it. Now that we're in double elixir, place the next golem into the same lane as my first golem, and then I just plow through. Okay, I know this video is getting real long, so let's go ahead and jump into 1 or 2 more replays. Yeah, these are all 3 crowns. So let's do both of these 3 crown replays, show you the 3 crown potential of this deck, and then we'll call it a video. Why not 4 times it? Because I don't want to go on for too long here. You can see I completely ignore the left lane there. I do place the flying machine just to the right now, so that it shoots the units in the left, kind of defends my king tower, and then goes to push with my golem. At this point, it's not looking great for me, but I don't give up hope because I know I'm playing a very heavy beatdown deck. I get the goblin hut down, he kind of counters it. I go for another big push with the golem. I say, YOLO, let's do it, let's go for the big push. I put all that support behind him. He tries to counter my support with his E-barbs, but I defend quite well. Then the lumberjack runs in and dies, get the rage benefit. Alright, got to play a little bit of defense here. Now see how I place the golem a little bit in front? Because I was worried that he might kind of try to push as soon as I put that golem down in the back. And I was worried I'd run out of time, so I placed it a little bit further up. I go for the massive push with 2 golems and all the support cards, and that's it. GG. Another 3 crown. Now we're getting to over 30 minutes on this video now, so let's watch this last replay, and then let's call it a video. This is going to be a treat for those of you that like my longer videos. I, of course, am considering doing shorter and shorter videos, because most people only watch YouTube videos for a couple minutes, and that's completely fine. You just swing by my video, check out a deck, listen to 1 or 2 tips, and call it a day, right? I don't mind. As long as you're checking out my channel, I'm flattered. So let's take a look at this last deck here. Excuse me, this last replay. Of course, as I say, I'm wanting to do shorter videos. I come out with more and more long ones, right? But hey, whatever floats your boat. It's my channel. I like to talk a lot, so I like long videos. Alright. I go for the golem push there. I'm going to do this one in double time so I can talk a little bit more about it. That quad time was a bit too much for me. Now you can see the rage is really beneficial, the rage from the lumberjack. It benefits your spear goblins really well. It also synergizes really well with the flying machine. Your flying machine just goes blam, 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 and blows up their princess tower if it's got a rage on it. It often locks onto the princess tower before they can react to it, and it gets a ton of damage off. You can see the hog runs over to my goblin hut, which only had a little bit of health left anyway, so I didn't mind. The lumberjack is then used to finish the job. Lumberjack is doing work there, just kind of hanging out behind the golem while the golem tanks for him, as he is known to do. I get another golem down with all the support, and that's pretty much it for him. Alright, you can see it's pretty much over there, and there's the 3 crown. Alright guys, thanks so much for checking out this awesome Golem Night Witch beatdown video. If you have any suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting, and I will do my best to respond to everybody and incorporate suggestions as I see fit. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good night.